Whoever you are, wherever you're from, your story starts by choosing a path, finding your feet, and moving forward. When you're at ease with the world around you, you're free to be yourself, free to discover, connect, express, share, and belong. From time-honoured traditions to the breathtakingly new, alongside our partners, donors, and volunteers, we work with communities to inspire literacy and learning. Our unique projects and programs are anchored in experience and research, whether it's books for kids, supporting refugees, or helping First Nations peoples keep their languages and culture alive. We empower people through tailored support and authentic connection. So everyone, wherever they come from, however they identify, can confidently express themselves, engage with society and share their stories. Embracing the extraordinary opportunities life brings, literacy is freedom. It's the way to a fairer, more inclusive Australia. Help make it happen.
Good afternoon, Sarah. That's such an inspiring video that it strikes me there's so many additional questions I would like to ask you. Thank you for joining us here today in our Impact Leaders webinar. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us your role at the Australian Literacy and Numeracy Foundation?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jeremy, for having me today and having our team here today. If I could, I'd just like to start by firstly acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I stand today, the Gadigal people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. My name's Sarah Donnelley. I am the Director of Projects at the Australian Literacy and Numeracy Foundation, an organisation that believes that literacy is freedom, as you heard in that gorgeous video and can see on this amazing T-shirt I'm wearing as part of our Days campaign. And it's great to be here today. Thank you for having us.
It's been so inspiring for us to learn about the work that you do, and having been up to Alice Springs, which is obviously, somewhat a remote part of the country, but I know you work as a team in much more remote areas of this vast country. Can you give us a sense, because this was always very shocking for me, there's parallel realities at the best of times, but for First Nations people in this country, the outcomes related to literacy and numeracy are often terrible, to put it bluntly. Can you just sort of share at a basic level, how high some of the rates are for illiteracy and numeracy, and where particularly in the country is this most affecting these communities?
So I think I would start by saying that one of the things that I find not confronting, but I think is something that we all need to be really aware of, is that often we consider these rates of illiteracy and some of the gap in being so large between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians in terms of literacy levels. We think about it as being an issue that's so far away, and you mentioned that we do certainly work in some of the remotest parts of Australia and communities in those regions. But also I think it's important to remember that it is, in a lot of cases, just down the road or almost on our doorstep, that there are people, Indigenous people of marginalised communities who are experiencing this real gap in literacy levels. And it's something that is really important for us to address. And so obviously our work as a foundation is working with the people who wrap around young people in these communities across the nation and wanting to support them to try and support the young people that they work with and the families as well.
So what are some of the rates that you're seeing, even in, like you say, not necessarily remote parts of the country?
I'll have to get some numbers for you. I don't have numbers in front of me and I wouldn't want to misrepresent. I think that it's something that is certainly a divide and certainly something that is very prevalent in our communities that we work with. And I'll make sure that I get some numbers for you so that I don't misrepresent them.
I hope I'm not misrepresenting in saying that from my understanding, it does exist that in remote parts of Australia, there is illiteracy and numeracy of rates of up to 70%. And I think, I say that only to give a sense of, as you say, there is an enormous divide. And I think most Australians would be shocked to know that something that we mostly take for granted, the ability to read and write, is denied for a number of our First Nations people. Can you give us a sense of, I know ALNF, having spoken with Kim and the team a number of times, are really doing incredible, deep work. I think it's often, where the rubber hits the road, quote unquote, is actually how these projects come to life, and how you work with communities strategically, sensitively, in order to unlock their own local solutions and empower them. Could you give us a sense, as Director of Projects, of the kind of work that you're doing, quote unquote, on the ground in the field, and how you're bringing that to life, and kind of even the time span required to think about the kind of support that's needed to move the needle?
Yeah, absolutely. So only 1 in 10 can read and write at an acceptable level in some of our very remote communities here in Australia. So it's quite a startling statistic, and you're absolutely right in the acknowledgement that many Australians don't consider or think about the reality of not being able to read and write, and that is certainly a reality for many people in Indigenous communities across Australia. The ALNF works to wrap around, as I mentioned, all of the caring hands around young people. That's how we like to talk about it, because we know that where we can really promote change is in education and with working in early childhood and young people throughout their schooling career. So we have a number of support programs and resource programs that help us to work with people in communities, from here in Western Sydney to Palm Island, from Alice Springs to Kempsey. I really like, as you mentioned, that an important part of our ethos is working in collaboration with communities. So absolutely being strategic in our planning and our delivery. But our trainers, our support staff here in the office in Sydney, our headquarters, our trainers who go out and work alongside communities are very much developing the programs and the implementation in collaboration with community to understand the context of not only the levels of literacy and what needs to be addressed, but how it is culturally respective, how it is actually working with the people who remain in communities. We know that there's high rates of transience in terms of education, teachers moving in and out of communities, but the people who stay are the people from those communities and who will continue to stay. So we start with our early language oral literacy program, which is about supporting early childhood workers, whether that's teachers, but also training the community members that work in early childhood centres, that work in play groups with health organisations, and providing them evidence-based practice, key quality literacy skills, so that they can work with the young people in those communities. So we're starting from the bottom, we're starting from the youngest in our communities, and also supporting parents and families with some of that training, because we know that so much of learning actually occurs in our homes before we even step foot in a school or a preschool. So our programs really work with the people working in those sites, but also the families and community members, the aunties, the uncles, everyone that wraps around those children.
No, I was just going to, so to that point, what key factors would you say are responsible for such high rates of illiteracy and numeracy in some of our rural and remote communities?
Access is a huge impact, a huge key factor. Access to health, access to education opportunities, all play into our ability to access and make the most of educational opportunities when we get there. Things like housing, which can be such a challenge in some of our remote communities. Without having stable housing, that of course has an enormous impact on your ability to go to school, to learn, to engage with educational opportunities. So there's arranged transgenerational illiteracy, a negative experience from school, intergenerational trauma. All of these things play a large part into rates of literacy and ability to engage with education.
And it's complex, isn't it? I mean, there's so many systemic reasons for which these rates are so low. I mean, having spent a little time in Alice Springs, as I mentioned, and some time with elders in the community, there's different time frames as well around. I just feel it's an interesting point. Like we kind of often enter, we bring our own assumptions and around, how things might or should be done within a specific time frame based around our kind of constructs of efficiency. Could you sort of speak to that, around the sensitivity which you mentioned, and around kind of working in collaboration with the community and even getting their approval to kind of work with them? Could you perhaps shed some light on some of the intricacies and delicacies around working with First Nations people, and not bringing our own assumptions, which is often can get in the way when doing this work?
Yeah, I think that in working with any group of people or any community of people, the most important thing is first to listen and to understand and to really value what knowledge, understanding, cultural knowledge, cultural awareness, experience, what they bring to that conversation, to then work in collaboration to really plan strategically together. My background before working with the Australian Literacy and Numeracy Foundation was as a teacher, and we always talk about what are our young people, what are our children bringing in their backpack when they arrive to our classroom. Because if we're going to engage them in learning that meets where they come from, meets their need, we need to first understand their story and what they bring and really value that, not ensure that school isn't a place where we're just devaluing the incredible skills and knowledges that young people bring into the school, into the classroom. I believe it's exactly the same when we're working with any kind of community or group of people, adults, whether we're working with Indigenous communities or any other marginalised community. But I think specifically, particularly when working with Indigenous communities, it's important to acknowledge that there's a long history, and so of trauma and of challenge and a lot of distrust, and understandably so. So I think as an organisation, whenever we're engaging with a new community or in the work that we do when we stay working with the community, it's about listening first, it's about understanding and trying to understand all of the complexities of the experience for the people that you're working with, and then co-design. So it's about empowering and knowing that communities are incredibly strong. Marginalised communities, I would argue, are the strongest of our communities, and they know what is needed. They know what the problems are. Our parents, our families, our communities, they want their young people to learn, and they're passionate about working with us to engage and to do that in the best way that's possible.
Where does your passion for empowering Indigenous communities come from? Was it from also being a teacher, or was there perhaps a moment or a series of moments that made you realise that this would be your life's path?
There's a series of moments, and it's kind of all wrapped up into the same idea of why I became a teacher and why I'm working for this organisation, and why I, see myself in education in whatever shape that takes for the rest of my life. There's a number of moments, but people, I would say more so, a number of people who've really impacted me in my life, and particularly some really important First Nations people that have had a massive impact on my life. They are in the forms of friends, of colleagues, mentors, and now some people that I consider, they are the closest, they are my family. I worked in a remote community in far west New South Wales for the last few years, and was teaching and living and working out there, and felt some of the challenges and the complexities of living in these kinds of communities, and got to feel what that felt like firsthand. So I think that these people along my life that have inspired me, that have taught me more about myself and about an awareness of other people's experience, but most importantly, strength and how creative they are when faced with challenges. You know, those are the people that inspired me to want to work in education more broadly, but particularly to work with empowering Indigenous communities.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. They often say the two most important days of your life is the day you were born and the day you work out why. So I've had the real privilege to meet some extraordinary people like yourself who are deeply committed and know in their heart and soul why they must do the work that they do, and it's very inspiring. And so, what keeps you going then? I mean, you must see a lot of challenging experiences and hear a lot of difficult stories. Are you seeing systemic change on the ground, or what would it take, and what keeps you going in those more challenging or even those darkest times?
What keeps me going is the opportunity that I have to talk with, to develop strong relationships with people who are facing these challenges every day, and to continuously see them show up, to not want anyone to feel sorry for them, to know that they can see what the issues are and what the complexities are, and they have the answers. And often people who I speak to just want someone to stand alongside them to help them make those ideas and those solutions a reality. At the ALNF, I mentioned earlier our early oral language and literacy program, but we have a range of other programs in the education space, subtext, which is literacy through creative art expression. We have a number of resourcing opportunities, our breakfast library. We support our learning sites to put on breakfasts for the young people when they arrive in the centres, and every fortnight we give them new books. And for some of those families, you know, you mentioned before that reading and writing is actually such a luxury. Having books in homes can also be such a luxury. So for some of our families and communities, getting this brand new book every fortnight has given them an opportunity to build a family library at home and to start sharing with language and stories. So I think what keeps me going is seeing those young people, seeing the young people that take those books home and want to sit with, whether it's a migrant grandfather who hasn't had strong English themselves, our Indigenous young people who are going home and sharing with mum and dad who may not have had a positive experience at school themselves. It's these young people that are coming through who will be the leaders of tomorrow, but it's also the families and communities who are facing the challenges, and that's why we are there to provide the support that we can to work collaboratively with them. But they continue to show up and they continue to address the problems and to try and find new ways to deal with them and be creative around that. So it's certainly the people, the relationships. There is always hope, and there is always people ready to stand up and take charge and take lead with those responses.
So if we were to follow the journey of, say, one of those projects providing books, which is tangible, in that it's an easy one for, I guess, us to wrap our heads around, could you speak to what makes ALNF unique in respect to its focus and methodology, and the delivery of projects like providing mobile libraries and giving children books?
Absolutely. So I think that, you know, we talk about wrapping around the child, and, you know, sometimes I liken it to the different layers of an onion. We started the conversation, and you're right, something less tangible. It's that idea of training the many caring hands around the child, and that's kind of as an organisation where we start, and that's so crucially important. But each layer extends out and provides greater experience and other supports for the children. You know, the breakfast library, it's more than just a meal and a book to take home. So a project like that, it starts, I mean, I don't know about you, but personally, if I haven't had something to eat that day, I find it more difficult to concentrate at work and to think about what we're going to do differently. So for a young person arriving to school with an empty tummy, we know that that has such an impact on their ability to engage in learning, to participate in learning, to be thinking, paying attention. So it starts as, okay, we're providing breakfast in the morning. And we team that, obviously, we're about literacy, the Australian Literacy and Numeracy Foundation. So we team that with providing these really high quality resources and books and getting them into homes and supporting through that. But then ongoing to that, because we're working in close collaboration with our schools, we then see that these programs become so much more than that. So in one of our schools, we have a crate on the bus, and they're taking books home on that way, and they're reading books on the home before they get home. In another school, our breakfast library has become a lesson around recycling and products and sustainability and change, and inspiring young leaders in that path and in that journey. In another site, it's become a leadership opportunity, and it's about older students reading to younger students. So something that, as you say, can be so tangible and can be as simple as, on a level, providing a book and a breakfast, is a part of a bigger ALNF story. And all of our different programs, our education programs, our training programs, our resourcing, they all fit together as parts of a puzzle that come to be a whole for us to try and wrap around a community in need as much as we can. Of course, always working with them about what that support looks like and how we deliver it.
And so, to deliver what is incredible work, as an organisation, how important are partnerships, would you say, to enable you to do what you do?
Partners are everything. We talk about it being our bread and butter because, obviously, importantly, they provide funding, and the work that we do, we just simply couldn't do without the funding that we attract. But I think also partnerships provide really important opportunities like today, which are opportunities to talk to new audiences, to broaden empathy and understanding and awareness when we can talk about the issues and the challenges faced by our communities and the problems that are there, but also allowing us to provide solutions and to provide creative solutions. And through new partnerships, we have new ideas and ways that we can create opportunities for learning. You know, through our breakfast library and some of our partners, we've been able to explore different types of books, different authors. We have partners with other organisations that allow us to do online storytelling and all sorts of different things. So partners are incredibly important, firstly, because they provide us with the funding. Secondly, because they allow us opportunities to talk to new audiences and reach more people to share the work that we do. But also they're a really important part of our creative ability to address some of the problems and in what ways we do that.
Yeah, it's exciting to see so many sectors work together in ways which often they haven't. And typically I'd say the business and the not-for-profit sectors have kind of lived in their silos for many years. And yes, they've relied on funding, but you know, I've always been a big believer in how much value these two industries have to offer each other. And so it's really wonderful to see so many partnerships come to life. And effectively, ICOChange is enabling funding via retailers and increasingly via all kinds of businesses. We've actually just launched an ability for professional services to also give back when they send an email, if they're around the time of an invoice, or if they're just wanting to engage their stakeholders and make a donation at that time. We've been able to raise in a relatively short time for ALNF over $222,000 and counting. Could you share what funding of this level, I mean, you know, it's not a small amount anymore, it's not enormous, but it's growing. I mean, but even at that level, could you share what that kind of funding is able to, what impact it's able to create for people on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always say that every dollar counts, and any donation, whether it's big or small or substantial like this, it enables us to do the work that we're so passionate about and driven to complete. Funding like this supports all of our work with First Nations communities, and it allows us to think strategically and reach the communities and families who need our help the most, and to evaluate where we are and where we've had interest from other communities reaching out and needing help. Funding like this, which is ongoing, allows us to strategize and respond to the need, and know that there's continued support. So that's something that is really refreshing and really, really helpful and beneficial to us, so that we can set long-term strategic goals and also think about initially what we're going to do to achieve those. I can give you, for an example, this amount of funding gives us an ability to reach 987 children across the nation in communities that are most in need, providing the vital training opportunities, as I was talking about before, working with community members and reaching the many caring hands around children to support the development of critical language and literacy skills in that early years education, so when it matters most. But likewise, it also gives us an ability to distribute 18,500 brand new books to children in every corner of Australia, including some of our most remote locations. We have a community where there just wasn't an ability even to freight to that community. So each fortnight, one of their community members drives to pick up the books and take them back to their community. So thinking creatively out of that. So you can hear there's sort of this tangible aspect of 18,500 books. And then there's all the breakfasts that are associated with that as well. But then also, 987 children. That's a significant amount of children that we're able to reach with our trainers going out and working with those communities.
That's wonderful to hear. Yeah, that's fantastic. It really brings to life. I for all of us, as an organisation, we've been able to raise over $8 million now, which is incredibly exciting. And yet, to hear how that is bringing to life change on the ground and the number of lives that it's touching is really what all of this is about. And we're so committed to backing incredible organisations such as ALNF, and just hearing from yourself today and speaking to Kim and the team over now a few years, there's such deep expertise and respect for the communities that you're in service to, and a desire to deeply understand, and as you say, walk alongside to be part of the solution, not the solution. These communities, as you say, know what they need. They are in and of the community, and it's complex, but ultimately forming these partnerships is what moves the needle in a meaningful way. So, Sarah, when you open your eyes each day, I'm curious, what do you most look forward to? What sort of excites you most about the work that you do?
I have to say it's the people. Every day, if I'm not in a school or a preschool, which is just incredible and so inspiring to be meeting young people every day who are doing amazing things, and the educators that are working around them. But if I'm not there, I'm in the office here, I'm talking to people like yourself, I'm talking to incredible organisations who want to support the work that we do, talking with community members, talking with people working in schools about how we can continually improve our programs and broaden our support. So it's really inspiring to be able to work for an organisation. I'm relatively new here, but I've known and worked with the ALNF for a very long time in my experience being in a remote community. To work with an organisation that is so evidence-based, so driven by wanting to do the right thing and to do it in the best possible way. I mentioned earlier that what drew me to this organisation was that when we start working with a community, we don't walk away, we stay there. And you've mentioned Kim and our other co-founder, Mary Ruth, their expertise and their passion for not walking away from a community, from supporting and staying, is really inspiring. So from all levels of the work that I do, from the schools, the young people, the educators, to the partners and our businesses that we work with, and people, philanthropists who want to donate funding, to young boys. We had an 8-year-old boy who recently ran a book drive, and we have a share a book program where we collect, people donate really high quality books, secondhand books, and then we're able to get them to some of our communities most in need. An 8-year-old boy who was raising awareness for us and collecting books in order to donate. Then to the people who are within the organisation, as you mentioned, the expertise and the real drive, the ethos and philosophy in this organisation. For me, it's certainly people every single day.
So if I can ask, when you look back on your life, hopefully a long time from now, personally and professionally, what will you be most proud of?
I think I'll be most proud of my ability to listen and my ability to learn. And I hope that that ability will ensure that throughout my life, I'm enabled to build relationships, and that myself personally and professionally, in whatever role that is, if it's in a classroom as a teacher, if it's as director of projects here at the ALNF, I'm someone who understands, and I'm someone who, if I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. And I certainly know that working for this organisation, we align with those beliefs. So it's a great fit for me to be somewhere that if we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it.
So speaking of getting things done, how can I Could Change businesses help?
I think it goes back to what I said, which is businesses can help in a broader range of ways. Raising of generalised funds, so like this, which allows us to continue our strategic work, is really, really important. I mentioned that every dollar makes an impact. It doesn't matter how small or how large. We have some great partnerships where, whether it's apparel, so I'm wearing our Deus t-shirt, and we have a number of other partners that will do campaigns to raise funds through their products and by selling their products. But also it's about the story. And as I mentioned, it's about raising awareness. So telling the story on product tags, sharing in platforms like this, talking about what we do. I haven't, there's so much I could talk about the ALNF. I haven't even mentioned our really pivotal and important work with the Living First Languages platform, where we're working in partnership with communities to revitalise and to allow communities, and it's driven by their work, we just support it, but to revitalise and preserve their languages, and then think of ways that they want to use that, whether it's creating websites or educational apps. There's so much work that we at the ALNF do that I would really encourage businesses to find out a bit more and to see where their interest aligns. And we'd love to partner in all of those different ways.
Well, we're very committed to this partnership, and for any businesses that are listening and joining us today, firstly, if you're already giving back to ALNF, it's thank you. NAIDOC Week, I know, is coming up very shortly, so there is time to come on board and begin supporting ALNF for this really important week. And we're increasingly providing that content so you can bring your storytelling to life across your channels as a business, to talk about the support that you're helping to create, supporting really life-changing organisations like the ALNF. So just reach out to the team, reach out to us, join the movement if you'd like to become one of our Australian businesses that's giving back from every sale. And Sarah, thank you so much. It's really inspiring to hear from you and directly about the work that's happening on the ground. And there's obviously a lot of different projects that you're running, and I know there's a lot of, not only, as you say, passion, but a deep commitment to doing best practice work in this space. I'd love to ask if there's any questions from, quote unquote, the room, from the audience, and we do have coming up here from Chris. Thank you. Thanks for sharing, highlighting the challenges you and ALNF encounter. How does the organisation work with schools and communities to ensure sustainable and long-term literacy and numeracy education outcomes?
Thanks so much, Chris. I think what's really important, and what we believe is really important, is that co-design. So I love that you've used the word sustainable, and as someone who has lived and worked in a remote community, you often see people coming and going, and you see organisations coming and going. In the non-for-profit world, we see funding that then doesn't exist anymore, and so projects that have to roll over or get moved from one location to another. And these are the realities of what's happening out there and what we face. Certainly that concept of co-design is really important in terms of ensuring sustainable and long-term literacy and numeracy education outcome and development. It's about focusing at the many caring hands around young people. So our early language and literacy training, we focus, as I mentioned, on the early childhood workers, but also on the families and the communities around those children. We work with healthcare workers in communities because they're often the ones running the play groups. So it's about creating a shared language in a space and planning, co-designing that approach so that it doesn't rely on us being there. Our programs have training, but then ongoing mentoring so that we continue to help communities. It's not just a training program that then we deliver and we leave. We have a long-term commitment to mentoring and working with educators to ensure that they feel supported to create these high-quality learning opportunities for children and young people, and supporting community members on that journey as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that and for the question, Chris. It's such a great point. I mean, that long-term commitment to community is critical, isn't it? I mean, this sector is littered with examples of organisations that have come and gone, and ALNF is very much there for the long term. Any other questions? It's so amazing to hear the impact of the funds raised. Can you shed light on opportunities or actions Australians can take to further support the work that ALNF does?
We have our Literacy is Freedom campaign. So I guess one of the things is sharing messaging, sharing any of our social media. We have a new website that will be launching very soon. So there'll certainly be a lot of awareness raised about sharing that, because I think a very important way that you can help the ALNF to shed light on opportunities is just by spreading the message and sharing who we are and what we do. Often people think we are a really large organisation, you know, in the NFP world because of a lot of our media or some of our social media. The reality is we're a really small organisation. We do a lot of work and cover a lot of different programs and resources, but we are really small. So awareness that then will hopefully lead to more business partnerships, more funding. As I mentioned, no matter how big or how small, we have schools that do book drives for us. We ensure that anything that is given is really strategically used and given to the people who need it most. So there's certainly from our end, whether it's a donation of really beautiful books, whether it's an ongoing sustainable business partnership, we make sure that everything counts.
Everything counts and every dollar adds up. Sarah, thank you so much for your time today, for sharing the journey with us and your passion for doing this work. And obviously it's a lifelong journey. We often note how people in this sector have been touched in one way or many by a moment in their life that has realised that their commitment to this space is one which they actually almost don't have a choice but to continue on. So obviously that comes through very loud and clear with you, and great to have an update from the field. And again, thank you for your time and for the work that Kim, Jasmine and the whole team. It's really an honour to be partnered and supporting your work, and thank you once again.
And Jeremy, I'd just like to say thank you so much on our behalf. I mean, we've mentioned the funding that it's raised, but really it is, as I said, also this opportunity to talk to more people and to share the work that we do. I'm certainly on the beginning of my journey and feel very grateful to be in a place working for an organisation that, as you've mentioned, I'm being guided and supported by some incredible women, men, people who've been working in the field for a long time, who have a great deal of expertise and passion for working with communities. So it's a real privilege to be able to be here today and represent an organisation that is very close to my heart. And thank you so much for the support and continued support.
Our pleasure. And you know, the point you make is really highlights why we do these webinars, is to bring to life the incredible people running these organisations. You know, most people don't have a great understanding, not working in this sector. And sometimes there's a news story which, you know, may not be highlight the sector in the best possible light, which impacts sadly the whole sector. And so the effect of having these conversations, of really meeting the people working in these organisations, the passion, the expertise, the wisdom, the skills, the knowledge is, and you've really brought that to light today. So thank you once again, and thank you everyone for joining us. And again, NAIDOC Week is coming up, a really critical week on the calendar in the impact sector in Australia. So we look forward to your continued support, and Sarah and the ALNF team, we look forward to supporting you over years to come.
Thanks, Jeremy.